Hey guys, and welcome to this week's small group. Now this week we're going to be asking the question, what exactly is the Sabbath for us today? And we're going to come to the conclusion that Jesus is our Sabbath. Now different Christians have totally different ideas about what exactly a Sabbath is and what it is for. So let's start out with these two questions. What images does the Sabbath bring to mind? And in your mind, what makes a day holy? And do you have other days that you celebrate as holy, such as birthdays, anniversaries, etc.? And what exactly are those days? Clearly, we have made days holy, even days that aren't dedicated to rest or to God. So we at least understand the concept. Let's read where the concept of the Sabbath came from in Scripture. Read Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. Then skip to Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 through 3. And then we're going to skip to Exodus chapter 20, the end of the Ten Commandments, verses 8 through 11. In what ways are we created in the image of God? What exactly does it mean to be created in the image of God? How are we different from all the animals that weren't created in the image of God? And did God rest on the seventh day because He was tired? And if the answer is yes, how exactly was the all-powerful God tired? And if the answer is no, then explain to me why He would rest on the seventh day. So please don't miss the link here between those verses. Number one, we were created in God's image. Number two, He rested on the seventh day. And number three, if we are created in His image and He rested on the seventh day, then we also should be resting on the seventh day. I'm pretty sure that the all-powerful God wasn't tired on the seventh day. Maybe He was enjoying watching it all work together, but for sure He was modeling something for you and me that we need. Remember that taking the Sabbath was a huge leap of faith for the ancient people. They had to provide enough food and supplies so that they did not have to work on the Sabbath day. And they had to trust that God would provide for them, just like we have to trust that God will provide for us when we begin to tithe to the local church. So next I want you to read Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 12 through 15. What do we become slaves to in our culture? And how does forsaking the Sabbath lead back into a form of slavery in our culture today? And it was hard for the ancient people to take a whole day off per week. How does taking a regular Sabbath show that you can trust God in today's society? In the New Testament, Jesus healed a paralyzed man who was lying next to a pool because the man was hoping that he could get healing from getting into the pool at the right moment. For the first time in a long time, after Jesus healed him, the man had rest from needing healing. Let's read how the Pharisees reacted to Jesus giving this man rest on the Sabbath, and how Jesus planned to provide rest to all the rest of humanity. Read John chapter 5, verses 16 through 24. How is Jesus your Sabbath? And in what ways do you, or in what ways could you, rest in Him? You know, some of us are in the habit of resting in Jesus, but there's a lot of us who we don't regularly rest in Jesus. And what does taking the Sabbath look like in the redemption phase of history? That's the age of Jesus and His church. So Jesus didn't abolish the Sabbath. He didn't do away with it. He fulfilled it. Jesus is the one who gives us rest. He gives us rest from sin and death and shame. We should also look to Jesus to give us rest from even good work. So far, we have been talking with our heads in a theological cloud, but let's bring this discussion down to earth. What does observing the Sabbath look like in everyday life? That's going to be what we're going to be thinking about when we read the next few verses. Most of us are failing miserably at applying the Sabbath to our lives. Read Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. Do you tend to identify more with Martha or Mary in this story? And what do you learn about yourself and Jesus' attitude towards you through these passages? And what are some of the ways that we might strike a healthy balance between work and rest in our lives today? So Jesus fulfilled the Sabbath. He didn't abolish it, he fulfilled it. And so now, for those of us who follow Jesus, the Sabbath can look different to different people. We can express the Sabbath in different ways. So let's look at how Paul fights people who get all judgy about the Sabbath. Read Romans chapter 14, verses 4 through 6. How do these passages keep us from becoming legalistic about the way that we each observe the Sabbath? And do you relate to taking a day each week and making it holy? Or do you relate to taking a portion of every day and making it holy? Here's where the rubber meets the road. I want you to take an action step this week. Commit to your small group how this week is going to be different as a result of reading these passages. Then when you meet next week with your small group, I want you to ask each other how you did. So the action step this week, how will you do a better job of keeping the Sabbath in your life this week? After you each have an opportunity to express to your group how this week's going to be different for you, close in prayer. Ask God to give us rest this week as we reflect on Him. And remember, Jesus is our Sabbath. Have a great rest of your small group. We'll see you next week.